In Chapter 2 of Beginning SharePoint 2000 and Development, I show an example of how you work with SharePoint lists. Lists are really one of the fundamental artifacts within SharePoint. And in the book, you'll see that if you, excuse me, go to your SharePoint site, you've got a list that comprises name, region, size, and sales. Now, in the book, I tell you to use a text field for name, combo box, or I'm sorry, a choice box for region and size, and a text field for sales, a single line of text. In this case, what I've done is I've actually, if we go into lists and list settings, for sales, I've actually used currency. Just because that auto formats the currency for you. So for those of you who are using this book in other parts of the world outside the States, you can set your currency accordingly. Now, with that said, with the customer's list in place, the goal of this exercise in the book was simply to show you how you can add some code programmatically, or some entries rather, programmatically into that list. Now, in order to do that, I used a WPF application here, and you can see that I've built that. And really, at the end of the day, just to get that WPF application, it was new project, and of course going to Windows and creating WF project and giving it a name. In this case, the name was WPF SPList app, as you can see by the name of this particular solution. And right now you can see I've got some code spit here in the code behind, but in the actual UI, basically there's a number of different text fields and some labels and some buttons. A fairly simple process to build this, which essentially is going to your toolbox here, which you can get by going View Toolbox, and then simply dragging and dropping, controls from that toolbox onto the designer surface. Now the key thing here, if we look at the different controls, is each of the controls has a name. So for example, text box company name, text box region, etc., etc. And the three buttons at the bottom have events, click events. So you can see button update underscore click, button clear underscore click, and button exit underscore click. These correspond to the code behind, as if we click here at the top, you can see that we've got those different events here. As you can see, button update click, button clear underscore click, and of course button exit underscore click. And I've got some code here in my toolbox that I'm just going to add in a little later on. And this is very similar code that you're seeing in the book. There's one difference that I'll call out that I've actually logged on my blog, and we'll talk about that in just a sec. Now, one of the key things that we're going to be doing here is we're leveraging the lists web service in this example. So to get there, what I need to do is go and add service reference, click advanced, click add web reference. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in, should be here, there we go, in memory, tailspin demo, which is the name of my local instance of SharePoint. Now, in this scenario, I've actually installed SharePoint as a single instance, just a single instance on my laptop, okay, which is running 2008 R2. And then basically, in this case, you can see that I'm referencing tailspin demo underscore VTI underscore bin lists.asmx. And of course, that loads in the definition of the service reference that I can then use. And this is one of the core lists web services out of the box for SharePoint that provides a lot of different capabilities for me to interact with a list. So of course I added the reference already, and I called that reference, let's just get rid of this, my SP web service. Now if you ever want to go ahead and browse the service, you can also go and just go into your URL, your Internet Explorer or whatever other browser you're using, and type in that same URL, the service reference that you just did. And what that'll do, that'll load up, and then you can actually explore the different operations that are supported as a part of that web service. So with that said, here's my site, there's the web reference, and of course now let's just add some code. So basically, because I've got some code spit that I've already created, what I'm going to do is just add in some variable names, and if you've walked through the exercise or at least read through it in the book, you know that these variable names are just going to be variables that I'm going to be pushing into the actual list. I'll go ahead and add some information for the button update. Now, one thing I'll call out here is in the original code, I had system.credentials, system.net.credential cache.default credentials. I've changed that since to use default credentials equals true and pre-authenticate equals true, and that seems to work better for some reason in later builds. The earlier credential cache wasn't working, so there was a bug there. So basically what we've done is we've changed that, updated the code there. This is what you should be using. Now as you walk through, you can see that you're setting the variables here to be the text property from those text boxes. You are then creating an instance of your web service proxy. You're setting the credentials for that web service. Then of course you're providing the URL for the web service, which you have to do when you're using the core SharePoint web services. Now at this point what I'm doing is I'm going to create an XML object that'll allow me to enter in some information and create basically a query to add in whatever I pull from my WPF app, push it into SharePoint using a camel query, or a camel construct rather. And that's what this batch XML.inner XML is. You can see that I've got different field names, and what I'm doing here is I'm taking the variable that I've pulled in from my WPF. I'm actually inserting it inside the camel construct. Now one thing here you'll see here, field name equals title. I know many of you have known this already, but for those of you who are new to SharePoint, if you go back to SharePoint and you actually, let's go back to list settings and click the ribbon, click list and list settings, you'll see that here you can see the name field, but this was originally the title field. And even if you update that title field to be something else, the reference for that is always going to be field equals title. So wherever you reference and try and programmatically alter that, make sure that it's actual field name equals title. It's just one of those default things that you need to take care of when you're interacting with SharePoint. Go ahead. We'll do some more simple code here just to clear out the text fields, and then of course we'll add a method or an event to shut down the actual application. At this point, everything seems to be working in terms of the code that we need. So all we need to do is go ahead and hit F6 and build it, and then hit F5 to test run it. And that will launch the application. So what we'll do is we'll add in Fabricam, one of our famous companies here at Microsoft. We'll say this is in the North region. The size of this one would be Enterprise, and we can say the sales on that were 230, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so with that we can click Update, and what that should do is use the list web service to call in and update that particular customer's list that we created before. And you can see here that SharePoint list was updated. Click OK, we'll click Exit, and then we'll go back to our SharePoint site and just click Customers, and you can see there indeed is the entry from our WPF app. Now at the end of the day, the WPF app, it doesn't really matter what that client app is. What's more important in this exercise is actually leveraging the list web service. That's what really you should focus on. You could do it from a console app, you could do it from a Windows form app, you could even do it from WebPart. But the point is, what you want to do is leverage that list web service and get used to it. Again, just to summarize, you saw basically this is a supplement for the Beginning SharePoint 2010 development book in Chapter 2, just helping you get started with one of the WPF examples that was in the book. Hopefully this helped, and look for more of these webcast supplements as we move forward, as I'm going to be working through the book to revamp any code and look for any bugs, just to make sure that the developer community has updated information and some additional, at least some additional supplemental information to help them along in their SharePoint development. Okay, thank you very much.